All right. Well, welcome everybody today. I'm just doing a live stream because I think there's so much stuff that I've learned over the course of the last couple months doing different things. If you can't hear me or anything, if there's something you can't hear or whatever, make sure you let me know. I'm using something else here. So hi from Wisconsin. Great to see you out here. There might be a little delay in this, so if you're seeing something if I'm not getting to you right away, that's fine. Audio is good. Great. Awesome. So you're on there from Pennsylvania in the house. Awesome. Good to hear you or see you. See your comments. I'm getting your comments, which is awesome. Somebody's from Maryland and proud of it, apparently. So we have to. I'm going to start talking about some of the things that I've learned and some of the things that maybe you're interested in. I found interesting that is not like a controversial subject or anything. There's a lot of things going on right now that people may not understand. The more I delve into like the ranching aspects that people may have missed, like working with an ecosystem, people want to save. They like to save one animal. It is what people usually think we should manage for. It's like save the grizzly bear, save the wolf, save the wild horse or whatever. And then they demonize the rancher because of how he's utilizing public land and he's utilizing this. But there's an aspect to this that I think we really, it's not focused on me. There we go. That we really sometimes miss, especially if you live in a city or you're removed from the West. But I think even in the West, people that want the ability to use public land and the ability to have land, they become jealous of people who are like ranchers because they kind of control large portions of the land. But we have to understand one thing, and that's the fact that we have ranchers create a large portion of our food supply. So in this country, in the United States, we have a certain amount of land, and that land can be utilized for different things. We tend to focus on something that's emotionally driven, like how we can access it. And I do too. I like to hunt. I like to fish. I like to have adventures. So I like public land as an access point. But we have to realize that what land we have in the United States is not growing, and it will never grow. So as a society, we need to look at our land and see how it's being utilized for the future, because now is the time to change something if you need to, not when your whole society is so short on food that they can't actually even maintain themselves. Okay, so let's get into some of the comments and then we'll get started here with, that was just kind of my, how I'm going to introduce this, because this is kind of the subject that we're going to talk about. So, hey there. Oh, well, thank you so much. Workshop and tools tour. So somebody said, make your workshop and tools tour. What does that mean? What workshop and tools are you talking about? Hey, from Nebraska, how are you doing? I really appreciate it. Absolutely. I'm just going down some of the comments here. Yeah, exactly. Somebody said Montana equals Colorado 20 years ago. This is something we're coming to grips with in Montana, Wyoming, because I'm going to include Wyoming and Idaho in this, because we're kind of in a group out here in the West where we have such limited number of people. We have way more land than people, right? So it seems like there's this huge abundance of land, and there is, but if we don't protect it, if we don't protect that land, the natural order of a society is to think more without its stomach, especially when we're overabundance of food right now, right? That down the road, all of a sudden we end up with a shortage of land and we can't take it back. Once it's under houses, it's pretty hard to take it back. Once we implement certain situations, it can be a little bit of a problem. Do you send a lot of wild Mustangs to the East Coast? I don't think so. I don't have any wild Mustangs. So that's one of the subjects I wanted to talk about today was wild horses. So this is a controversial subject. Wild horses are controversial. And wild horses meaning Mustangs or feral horses. I mean, there's a lot of people that would call them feral horses. I can definitely understand that. So I live on old cattle grazing land, and we still have a lot of cattle around, but they are moving some of the pronghorn from here in the grazing. Okay, and that's an interesting thought. The pronghorn, there's a lot of issues in a society that is becoming civilized. So, or taking over more and more of the land that they have. So every country in the world has this issue. Every society, even the Mayans, the Easter Island, they have a certain amount of land and they take over more and more of it for resources. They use more resources. And so we have to be able to think about we don't have to, we should think about the resources we're using, how to put them back at the same time that they're productive. We're productive for the long term of society. And that's not something that's being talked about. It's about, we need to stop using vehicles and stop doing, we're trying to trash our economy without actually saving the environment or the economy, either one, or society. And that can have a lot of long-term issues. Okay. So as far as pronghorns, I'm sorry, I got lost. The pronghorn issue, we're losing pronghorns around here. And it is, I guess it could be an indirect problem with ranchers, but there was a pneumonia that got into our pronghorns in the area where I live in Montana. And that has caused a lot of issues. We've lost a ton of pronghorn antelope because of that. So those things are an issue as well. And all of this has to be thought out. And people think, oh, this is such a simple issue. There's about 1 million facets to what I'm talking about. So it's not really like, oh, here's the answer to this thing. I think the discussion has to happen, but the discussion has to happen in a way that is not like, I'm against you, you're against me, this is the way it has to be or not. There's a few areas like that. We pay taxes to leave Mustangs on their land. Okay, this is exactly where I want to start, because the concept of Mustangs on their land is a tricky one. When I talk to biologists around the state who are managing properties for rewilding, a lot of the things that they're talking about do not include wild Mustangs, and they will not include wild Mustangs on them. And that's because, and even the national park, the Roosevelt National Park in South Dakota, I think it's in South Dakota, maybe it's North Dakota, I should probably know that. But anyway, that park is actually talking about removing wild horses from the park. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, wild horses there's nothing endangered about them. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, there is 141,000 wild horses right now in the U.S. that are managed by the BLM. So that doesn't include the ones that are managed by the Forest Service. At the last number that the BLM put out, I think that was in 2021. 141,000. I don't know if you guys understand how many that is. We have basically room for 25,000. So that means that we are so far overpopulated with wild horses in the areas that they are in that it could be a disaster down the road here. And so why I say there could be, here's one of the things that we have to understand, the concept that I'm talking about. Societies in the past that have destroyed all of their resources, like let's take Easter Island for example, because it's such an isolated community. Okay, Easter Island was a place where everybody died. Basically, almost all these Easter Island people died. They started eating each other at the end because they had nothing left, because they had cut down all the timber on their island, every bit of it. So when you use up all the resources and you don't put back resources, bad things happen, right? Now, where was I going with this? Mustangs. Man, anyway. I got off my subject. the principles of that is that you have to manage land for what it has. You can't overutilize it. That was what I was saying. You can't say, okay, we've had, let's say, the Pryor Mountain wild horses right here. This is a field guide to the Pryor Mountain wild horse range right here. I was down there just a couple days ago, and I'm going to make another video that I'll put out this weekend. Well, hopefully this weekend. Anyway, there's overpopulation of wild horses on the Pryor Mountain wild horse range. There's over 200 head, and they have room for around 115, according to the BLM. So people look at that, like I was down there right now, like I said, and you're seeing wild horses that are right now fat. They're fat, and there's grass there. Okay. Now there wasn't grass there this spring. It was like nothing. It was like bare dirt this spring when I did the other video. But you got to look at environmental issues. So last 2 years in Montana has been major drought. So any grazing anywhere, okay, has been a problem for the last couple of years, because you have the same amount of animals, cattle, horses, wild animals, everything, eating the grass that doesn't grow. So then you end up with overgrazing. But for the last 2 years in the cattle industry, people have dumped a lot of their cattle so that they can save their ground. So you've cut back the population of cattle to almost half in many areas of Montana due to that drought. But in wild horse range, you can't do that. You can't actually cut that herd down that fast. It's really, really hard, especially because it's such an emotional issue for people. Oh, let them run. They are letting them run, but they're in a fence. Horses do not travel everywhere like a deer or an elk. They're not going to jump all the fences. They're in a fenced-in area. So in the Pryor Mountain situation, anyway, they're completely fenced in because they can't travel through fences. So they don't have access to everything that you ever could. So that causes a situation where the last 2 years you run out of food. I talked to the lady in the visitor center, and a lot of horses disappeared last winter, I'm sure, because those older horses are going to die off when they don't have any food for 2 years, and then you have a pretty harsh winter. You're going to have a lot of winter kill. Okay. Now, this spring when I came, I didn't see a lot of the horses because they were way up high and I didn't get there. There was no grass left. Now there's tons of grass because we had one of the wettest springs I can remember in Montana. So this bounced way back, right? So when are you going to judge that grass? You judge it in for the last 2 years. You would say that we need to cut down those horses tremendously, but you judge it on a wet year, like a really wet year like this. Well, they're looking good, right? So when do you actually take that number and say, here's the proper number for this? Because you don't have the same exact, we say average rainfall for an area. You don't ever have exactly that amount of rainfall. That's the average. Like in Montana, we have 20 inches some years and 4 inches some years. So you're bouncing back and forth. You have to average that out and manage your resources, because what happens is these horses now have the wild horses. Well, let's just say any area that's overgrazed can be overgrazed for a couple years and still come back. But certain grass types, when they're eaten down to the dirt, right, they'll come back, but they have to use all the nutrients from the soil because they don't have anything left above ground. And then they'll come back once. But as soon as they start to come back, if they're grazed down to dirt again, after a couple times, some of these grasses that don't handle drought very well will just die off. So, yeah, I want to know how you purchased Calabar. So Calabar is not actually even my horse. Calabar we raised him. I should share a picture. I wonder if I can share a picture of him anyway, I'll go back to that in a minute. Somebody remind me to show you the picture of Calabar as a baby. Anyway, so I'm talking about this, you have to manage, sometimes you have to manage livestock on a property. And this is how they do it most. Okay. This is where I got to be careful. I can't say all or most or whatever. Good ranchers who actually manage their herds properly, don't manage them like, oh, they're looking good. So this is how, I guess we have 300 head on this 100 acres and they're looking good after a month. That's obviously the number we can have on it. No, that's not how you do it. You take the 10 years and you go, how much can I do without starting to see the dying of the grass? How much can I do without destroying this ecosystem? And so the number, if you're wise, the numbers that you run on a property are actually much less than it looks like you can do, because you're saving up for those drought years, which are going to happen, especially with climate change. And we can talk about climate change as well. So anyway, let's talk about Calabar. So those of you that don't know, I ride a black horse. Now, the reason I ride a black horse is he's actually my dad's horse. But I kind of stole him because my dad has been injured, and he's one of the most beautiful horses I have ever seen. Let me see if I can show you a picture. So instead of getting a horse of my own, I just stole stole Dad's horse. And he's not going to ride him yet anyway, because my dad's been injured like off and on over the years, but recently, the last 2 years, he's been really injured. He had a head injury and had to have some blood leaked off his brain. And then he tore his shoulder off because he got hit by a heifer. That's a cow. A heifer is a cow that hasn't had a calf yet. So when he was trying to tag a calf, she hit him and tore his bicep off of his shoulder. So he's just had surgery for that. All that stuff to say that now I've tried to buy him from Dad. He's not ready to sell him to me, but so I have just ridden him because it's a good excuse. I can get him broke, right? He was just started when I took him over. He'd been ridden a little bit the year before. So I have started to use him very hard and train him. He needs a lot of miles. He's got a lot of energy. He's not like a super laid back kind of horse that you're just going to be able to let go in the pasture and he's not going to have a problem. So he needs to do that. So I need to continue to train him. Once I get him trained, then I suppose Dad will want him back. But so here is, see a picture of that. Let me see. See if I can focus on that. There's a picture of Calabar. If you guys follow me at all, you know what he looks like now. But that's Calabar as a baby. So his mom was actually the sister to my horse, my Magnum horse, which is a different. I rode a really big roan horse for a while. I had him for about 6 years. This is him here. So, because we raised, I don't know if you can see that. It's trying to focus all over the place here. Kind of see it. It's a little white. Anyway, this horse is really, really big. And he was a phenomenal horse. And when he was 8 years old or so, he just died out in the field. I don't know what happened. I have no idea. He was in great shape. Everything was fine. He just died. So we don't really know what happened to him. But anyway, his sister is actually Calabar's mother. And then his mother died in childbirth with Calabar. So that sucked. But so because of that, just for you guys, because some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, what Calabar looks like, but some don't. So let me see if I can find a picture of him recently. Anyway, so he's a relative of these horses. It's a really good line of horses. They do sometimes buck a little bit. Calabar doesn't, or he did once, which broke my ribs and left me on the top of the mountain, if you remember that. But he's going to be a fantastic horse. He was getting to be a really fantastic horse until I got too busy and haven't been able to ride him for a little while now. September is going to be busy for me. I'm going to be back out with Calabar. So he is going to have to get busy. Lots of miles to do this year. Hopefully, I don't know if I can, but I'm trying to figure out how to go down to, if anybody knows anybody that I can, ranchers down in Arizona or Texas, I would love to go down there in the winter. Yeah, So yeah, and so the horse that I owned that died. I'm trying to find a picture of Calabar. I need to take more pictures of Calabar. Apparently, I got videos of him, but mostly of me riding him, so you can't really see him. Magnum was that big horse, that big roan horse was actually 16'3", which means 16 hands plus 3 inches. Man, you get a pair of chaps on, it was really hard for me to even get my leg up that high. He was tall and he weighed about 1,600 pounds. I'm going to find a picture of him somewhere. Don't you? Oh, there we go. See if I can get it. I don't know. That's not a great picture of him. But anyway, this is him now, or last summer. He's a pretty horse. No, that's not. You can kind of see the other angle of him there. I'll focus on. There you go. And he's actually much bigger than he looks, but he's got a very, very nice head on him. So it's a very small head for, especially for a quarter horse. Anyway, I don't know if that's what you got. Painted Desert Ranch. Oh, you know what? I did talk to them, and they said they might be okay with that too. So of me coming down there and riding them. So one of the things about ranching is a lot of these ranchers are they live in fear. Speaking of our present condition in this country, right? They live in fear of some of the stuff I talk about. People get upset with me about, the fact that we have to actually limit and manage our property, which means we have to manage wild horses and wild animals and things like that. People get very upset about that. So some ranchers don't like me, are uncomfortable with me coming on and showing what they do, because they've developed this fear of society, which is that's not healthy to have that much. I don't blame them in some regards, but it's very difficult to operate something where you're producing food for somebody that doesn't understand you're producing food, and they want you out of the business. They're like, no, ranchers shouldn't be in business, and yet they still eat food. It's kind of a interesting concept. Okay. Anyone from Alberta or Canada? I've talked to a couple of ranchers from up there. I don't know are you from Alberta or Canada? Just so how many ranchers in the U.S. are leasing land for cell phone towers, oil, gas exploration? Colorado becoming cell phone tower. So there's a few cell phone towers, but only about one. So I know one rancher. I don't know the details on it, but I think it's like $750 a month he gets for a cell phone tower, because it doesn't take up a lot of land. I mean, it's just basically a one spot. Usually they put it in a spot where it's not really good ranch ground anyway, so it doesn't do a lot. Oil and gas leases do pretty well, but they're out in eastern Montana. So, and they're trying to shut that down so hard for environmental reasons. People want to get their oil and gas from some other country so we can pay them instead of us. But especially countries like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense that we would pay somebody like Russia for oil and gas, or Saudi Arabia, that doesn't have any of the laws that protect the environment over there, which is still our environment, same world, right? Where if we do it here, there are ways that you can make companies do this exploration extraction. Not everywhere. We don't want them to do it everywhere, but in a way that you can really have a very low impact on the environment. So somebody said they're trying to buy a ranch in Oklahoma, and companies are buying up the land that's for sale. So what companies are you meaning, TJ? Is it like ranching corporations, or is it like other corporations? Because we're having that happen up here too. And that's part of what I'm talking about. Part of what I'm talking about is there's only so much land. And at some point, that land starts getting bought up, and it's kind of like because it becomes a commodity that's rare. So the more rare that land becomes, the more it costs, and the more that people with big money can own that land without really, and they don't really usually produce what that land could produce on it. And that gets to be a scary situation down the road. It may not be right now. We may not like it, but it may not be right now, but it will be at some point. I believe we need to protect our family ranchers. Not all family ranchers are really nice people. Some of them are recluses. Some of them are kind of arrogant about what they own, and this is mine and you can't do anything with it. And so, and some of them are very nice. It just, they're all people, right? But what I see is that when we take away the land from ranchers, we've lost in this country 44,000 ranchers in the last couple of years. That's a lot. I need to get the time frame on that. That's very bad. That means that people producing food for the nation and the world are leaving the industry. And what that means for us as individuals or society is that we're losing food producers. We're getting more into corporate farming and ranching instead of family farming and ranching. And family farming and ranching care more about their animals, actually. So they have to. It's not, let's throw 30,000 head in a feedlot and try to maximize our profits. It is, we need to keep these animals as healthy as possible. We need to care for our land as much as possible, because if we don't, our kids won't be able to enjoy and inherit this ranch. So because of that stuff that some people get mad at, oh, you're just going to keep it in your family, actually helps protect and gives you a better product that down the road in our country, down the road meaning throughout the years, as our food supply becomes different and our supply chains become different, we will actually need that. So, well, hello. So big land, big land to manage in the right way, a respectable number of cattle instead of getting it parked in a small place and only feed them with hay. And it let's see, is that a wade tree? Okay, quick. I'm just going to answer this quick question. Jeff Yu has a question about the saddle that I ride. So I ride a saddle that's similar to a wade tree, but it gets tricky because they call a wade tree, it has to be 5 inches from the front to the back of the forks there, and mine isn't. So it's not a true wade, but it's very similar. It's built like a wade. So most people would call it a wade, but I prefer a 7/8 rigging. It's between a 3/4 and a full double. Oh, well, welcome somebody from Sweden. Awesome. So all these countries, like over in a lot of the countries in Europe and around the world, have already gone through this transition where they've gotten people have sort of started competing for land that produces food for their nation, right? So at some point that drives up the prices of the land, and only people with money can then buy more land. People without money can't get into these industries of farming or ranching or anything like that. In this country, we're starting to see that in Montana and Colorado and places like that, where they're driving up the price of the land because the demand for that resource is greater. But we don't have that. It's not completely unheard of yet. The problem is the ranchers can't really make any money. And people think ranchers are rich because they drive new vehicles. Ranchers struggle from day to day, like year to year, to try to make enough money just to get through. And the reason they drive newer vehicles, I've gone over this before. Time is money. Okay, time is money in a business like this. Reliability is money. So if you drive older vehicles that cost less money to buy, but they spend more time getting repaired, your money in repairs and the time that you would save not repairing them is why I, like in the horse leasing business, is why, which isn't really agriculture, but it's dealing with agriculture. That's what I managed for 20 years. I went from older vehicles to brand new vehicles because I'm like, we cannot sit somewhere. We have to get from here to there when we need to get there. We cannot sit and wait for something to be fixed. We can't put money into something in time, because every time we have to wait, it costs us something. So that is when you see them driving all new vehicles, and that is what they're doing. They're trying to put their money into something that's reliable, so they can get from point A to point, especially with a spread out place where you have to drive a lot of miles in a day. You're just trashing these vehicles. If you don't have a decent vehicle, you are, if you have to get up somewhere and feed cows, it's 15 miles away on a dirt road, and you're broke down, that could take you, how are the cows going to get fed? I mean, it's that important that you drive good vehicles. Now, ranchers, one of the main reasons ranchers don't make a huge amount of money is because the beef industry is getting hammered. Okay. Farming is a different story, and they're the ones who kind of get some of the subsidies from the government. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we can discuss that on a different day. But the beef industry is getting hammered. And the reason they're getting hammered is because the imports of beef from other countries, from very large corporations, are able to undercut the price so far that our ranchers have really no way to get their beef raised for that amount. So these packing companies and the retailers kind of set the price. If the price in the store goes up, the packers and the retailers, packers are the people who take the cattle from the feedlot, butcher them, and sell it to the retailers. The retailers are Walmart, Kroger's, Albertsons, places like that. Okay, so to you, right? So if the price of something goes up in the store, the rancher does not see that increase in price. Who sees the increase in profits is the retailer and the packer. They're the ones that set the prices. They're like, I'm only going to pay this much from the feedlot. So the feedlot then has to buy cattle from the rancher, and he doesn't have any margin. He can't change his margin at all. So he says, I have to buy it for this much from the rancher. Those two are pretty much locked in to whatever is set above them. They have no say in that price. So because of that, as the corporations at the top, the retailers, the Walmarts and everything get larger and more, they try to get more and more in bulk. They're bringing in beef from Brazil. And then this is something I just found out this weekend. If you repackage it here in the US, you can actually sell it as US beef. So when you go to the store and you see US or whatever, you buy beef that you're thinking is from the US. It's not. It's coming in from somewhere else, which is undercutting the ranchers here. And if we put our ranchers out of business, then more corporations come in and buy that land, or it goes into development because now somebody can make some money on it and develop it. It's gone forever, right? And then what do you do? At some point, we don't feel that pain right now because you still have enough competition with the ranchers doing what they're doing against Brazil. Once prices get to a certain point and you lose enough ranchers, then they just dictate whatever price they want for their beef. And we put our ranchers out of business. You will feel that. You'll feel that one big, because then they can set their prices however they want in the grocery store. And they'll just go wherever the profit is. It won't matter what you do. And 44,000 ranchers, and that it's incredible. Yeah, I did not realize that. I talked to a guy named Calicrate, and he actually was a guy who successfully sued one of these humongous corporations that was trying to dictate the price of beef in the United States, but the judge threw it out after the jury unanimously approved it. The judge threw it out. So, and that was a billions of dollar deal. So you got to understand a couple things. Okay. I am a businessman, so I understand the need for profits. If you're not profitable, you will not stay in business. Nobody runs a business without making profit. So even when you say nonprofits only work because they make profits, and then for at least enough for their employees, right? Or they don't stay doing what they're doing if they run out of money. Okay. Nobody does this for nothing. What do the older head ranchers think about your YouTube channel? Not sure exactly what you're asking, but anyway, well, I'm kind of rambling. I'm jumping over there. Sorry about that. Anyway, the business is ranching is a business, and these ranchers have gotten complacent, and I don't blame them. They work every single day, all day long, every 7 days a week, all year, to basically try to break even so they could maintain their ranching lifestyle. Their lifestyle has fantastic parts to it. The lifestyle itself is amazing. It is incredible. Okay. There's parts to that lifestyle that is the whole reason why they continue to do it. You raise your family. You go out with your family and do, family. I don't know if you guys saw the last one where I went up to Highwoods and did a roundup, and the family gets together and has a meal, and it's just fantastic family time, doing work. It's a way that you stay connected to nature in a way that you can't do elsewhere. Things like that. So if that part is awesome, but when you're working 7 days a week all year, and you're stressed to the hilt because you're not sure. I mean, you as a rancher, you only get paid once every year. That's when you sell your calves. So you're freaking out what that price is going to be. Because you're dictated if you don't sell your own beef to the end customer, which is a different story. We can talk about that at some point. Then what happens is you're just watching that beef price and going, oh no, is it going to be enough this year to cover my expenses? Is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? That affects everything you do. So you're not that happy when you get up in the morning. You're worried about oh no, I lost 2 cows. Where are they at? So and so called me and said they're out. When as land gets kind of interspersed with other like subdivision areas and things like that, it's more conflict with people. So you're stressed to the hilt because you're not making money. You're barely making enough, right? And if any one thing goes wrong, like some big disaster, like a drought, you're out of business, or at least 2 years ago, you're out of business. So that stress carries over to how you deal with your children. You start getting upset all the time. Your temper is short. Just think about how you guys are when you're super stressed all the time. It's not, nobody really loves to be around that, right? So even though you're so enamored, you have this amazing life, you can't even enjoy it because you're stressed about everything that's going on. So I know that the word profit has like a bad name now. Oh, if the rancher makes a profit, he's this evil jerk. But Walmart can make a profit because we can buy stuff from them cheaper. So you got to throw that out there and understand that keeping this guy alive and not only giving him a profit and giving him a profit actually enables somebody to stay in business, which then protects that land from the corporate world. And when I say corporate world, I don't mean just corporations. I mean huge corporations. And some of them are decent. Some of them are like the mafia. Okay. Especially in the beef industry. Not in the especially, all over. You get big enough, a lot of them throw the weight around politically. They throw the weight around with, these 2 brothers, whoever they are, that run this, one of the 4 huge packing companies, they get fined all the time for bribing the government in Brazil constantly, like millions and millions of dollars. They don't care. They just pay less for their cattle because they can dictate the price. So all of this stuff goes on. And I want to focus on the answer, though, the answer is how do you Sorry, my camera, I got to keep it awake, and I didn't keep it awake. Apologize. There we go. Whoops, too much. How's that? That's a little dark. Shoot. Sorry, guys. I totally messed up and I let it go. Ah! Oh, well. Is that good enough for now? Okay. So anyway, this is what we're dealing with. And to help this, really, ranchers have to start selling beef to the customers themselves, which creates a lot of issues because the big companies have made it really, and the USDA have made it very difficult and expensive for local ranchers, family ranchers, to be able to butcher their beef and get it USDA inspected so they can sell it to you directly. It's very difficult. Now I see that changing. I do see that changing. There's one in Helena that's going in that hopefully will make it, because if it doesn't, then you got the same problem. I see one going in Billings. Marbled Meats is now a USDA inspected place where you can get your meat packaged so you can sell it to customers. So some of these ranches, like somebody ranch, let's see, I was just down at the what the heck is it called? Riverton, Wyoming, for their annual beef roundup. It was a fantastic thing. It's just like, it was a place anybody can come to it. It's a rancher's thing to promote ranching, and a lot of these people are selling their own beef. And we need like markets in local markets in our local towns for these people to sell their beef to. And so the problem is, or the limitations is we have become so accustomed to trying to buy the cheapest thing that we can find, regardless of how it's made or who it comes from, that we have to change our mindset to, like, we want a quality product. I will tell you one thing I learned is that this is kind of disgusting. One thing I learned that they're doing with hamburger, when you go to the store and you buy hamburger from the store, most of it comes from one company. That it's not even, it doesn't matter what package label it has on it. It's all coming from the same company. Almost all of it comes from the same, a huge portion of it, let's say, okay? Because I don't want to be taken out of context here. So this is what they do. This company brings it in from Brazil, and they take what's called pink slime. Pink slime is when you butcher the animal, that's like the drool that comes off of meat, and then they scrape it, the scraps off of a hide, and it is literally slime. It's just a slime. It's like fish slime, kind of, but pink. So they pelletize this stuff, and they put it in hamburger to add weight, because it's basically just water, to add weight and cheapen it up. And the USDA counts that as meat, so they can legally do this. And then this one company makes that product for extremely cheap burger, and then any company that wants to, you, me, anybody, could contact this company. Can't remember the company's name, probably should do that sometime, and they will package it with however you want it packaged, with your label on it. So when you go to the store, it's probably all the same meat. It's just, or based, most of the hamburger anyway, is that same meat. It's just packaged in a different way with a different label on it, with pink slime. So I was wondering, when I fry some hamburgers that you get from like Costco on a flat top grill, you notice these big slimy chunk. I thought they were like blood coming off of the burger, and it's just like globs. Now, when you fry it on a grill, it doesn't do that. It falls through, but it is actually, and it's pink slime is what it is. It's what's taking up, and we're eating this, and it's not just pink slime, because they have to wash that pink slime with something to keep it from growing bacteria and things. So it's ammonia something or other that they wash it with. It's horrible. Yes, Tyson is one of them. This isn't the one. Oh, then Jack's Meats. Oh, interesting. So this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. That undercuts what a local rancher can do. We can't raise beef here for under, that guy down there at Calicrate was saying $5 a pound is break even. So if you see something under that, that's not from here. No rancher is going to sell their product for a loss here. So, and that's the ground beef. They can't, like, I don't know how they would do that with like the steak and stuff, but anyway, yeah, it's disgusting. I thought, wow, that changes my opinion of what I was seeing on that grill and what comes in our burger. I mean, ugh, why would we want to eat that crap? Okay. So anyway, I just thought that's something I learned recently. So there's a process, though. We need to educate people on this kind of thing. I didn't know this. And I'm in the ranching community, and a lot of ranchers are just raising meat to try to sell to these companies, and they don't have any options unless they start selling it to other people. And that's a very big step for people, for ranchers. 2 years later, land developer and people are, yeah, exactly. So this is big right here. This is happening all over the place. A family friend was killed. Okay, this guy just commented. The widow had to sell out. About 2 years later, the land developer and the people he sold to sued the neighboring farmer as a public nuisance because of the manure pond. So what's happening is, as people move in, we have actually, the media in our country has seen fit, because ranchers are very quiet. They want to just mind their own business. They have seen fit to actually demonize ranchers for what they do to the environment and cows and being mean and all this stuff. Most of that is complete bull bleep. But anyway, because of this, people see this, they move into an area that's ag. And instead of seeing the ag as, these people are producing food that is actually, in the long run, going to keep our society alive, instead of doing that, they see them as the enemy. They see this as something that they need to do away with. And that is really sad. So really sad. And that's, to combat that takes a huge amount of work. So I'm thinking about, like, how do I do this? How do I educate people on these facts, but also be entertaining? Because so there's a lot of people I know that make shows about agriculture because they're trying to show agriculture, but they're just like education. So the people that are listening to them or watching them, because there's so much entertainment out there. YouTube is just full of entertaining content, right? Facebook is full of entertaining content everywhere. People that aren't interested in, they're only interested in one side of these issues, aren't watching that content unless it's entertaining. So I have to come up with ways to make it entertaining. I've thought of, one of the ways I can is one thing that's really big on YouTube right now is a catch and cook kind of a thing, like the solo survivalist thing. So I've thought about taking Cowboy and going out on the American Prairie Reserve, for instance, because that's kind of cool. What they're doing out there with buffalo and everything gives me an opportunity, ride out there with Calabar and stay overnight, cook the food right there, things like that. If you guys have any suggestions ever about how I can make my content more entertaining to people who aren't necessarily interested in figuring out where their food comes from, that's I always, you guys, I may not reply very, very often to comments anymore because there's just so many of them. There's constant, but I read as many as I can. I don't spend time watching things on social media. I read the comments. If I'm on social media, I'm reading the comments because I want to hear from you guys what you like and don't like, what you think of content from me, what, even the bad, the good, everything. The people who don't want, who are mad, because that tells me, like, what are the reasons that somebody would be upset with my content, things like that. So yeah, cow farts are destroying the ozone. I mean, that's one of the things. It's like we now, people think they know this as a fact, and it's not even. Look at the smog over a city. Okay, I would say the smog problem that's coming from your combustion engines, all the things that you're doing, have way more effect than any cattle. I mean, think about the 30 to 60 million buffalo that ran across the prairie 200 years ago. Though they're ruminants, what they call ruminant animals, so very, very similar to a cow. They have 4 stomachs. They regurgitate it and chew it up and swallow it back down. So, okay, who is in or near Helena that sells directly to community members? I would be interested in skipping the middleman. This is an issue because I don't know. There's the Mannix Ranch does, and I think they're going to start expanding a little bit. But if you are a rancher and you do sell beef locally, like you butcher your own beef and you sell it to customers, USDA inspected beef, make sure you leave a contact me somewhere, because I need to put together lists for people so they can find these ranchers who are selling homegrown beef. I'll tell you what, you will not believe how good beef is when you actually, I mean, well, maybe you have, if you've bought meat from a rancher or whatever. So I was just down at this Riverton, Wyoming, beef roundup thing. And so I was a celebrity judge, even though I don't think of myself as any kind of celebrity. But anyway, it was pretty cool. We got in the back room. The chef made the top 19 steaks that were sent in from all ranchers all over the country. Okay. And we got to try them, made by the same chef. So they were all cooked the same exact way with just salt and pepper. And I'll tell you what, I tasted some of the best beef. I don't know how you can get much better than that. It was so good. It was unbelievable. How to score that stuff was ridiculously hard. But I'll tell you what, that kind of beef you don't get from, some longhorn that comes overseas, or probably, I'm not saying longhorn, probably like the old cows that come overseas and the stuff that ends up in our grocery store. I don't know where our beef ends up, but we literally export most of our beef that comes from the United States, and import, because we like cheap stuff. So we import the stuff that we actually eat. So if you want to cut out that middleman and give more dollars to the rancher, you have to find one and buy it directly from him. Yeah. So I did try Wagyu before, but I don't think there was any Wagyu in this one. Wagyu is an actual breed of cattle that comes from Japan. So it's not like the way they grow it. It's actually a breed, and it has a lot of fat tenderness and like tons of fat tenderness. Actually, I prefer half Wagyu, which is called American Wagyu, because it doesn't have quite that kind of fat content. But the stuff I tried down there, actually one of them was Holstein Angus cross. So you might not think of Holstein as being this wonderful tasting animal. Holstein cows are the black and white painted cows that are actually dairy cows. We use them for dairies. But you got to think about one thing. At dairies, you have calves, right? Just all the time having calves. 50% of those are actually male. So they take those male calves and they actually put those as a food source. Okay. Well, these are crosses. And man, I'll tell you what, taste half that. Holsteins are actually a little slow growing, so it takes them a whole nother year about to get to the point where they're ready to butcher. But man, is it really good. So pink slime is actually more than just beef trimmings. So beef trimmings would be like a good thing. It wouldn't be that bad. We put that in our burger here, right? But pink slime is you know what? I'll find out the name for it, and I'm going to make a video, because I have an interview with this guy, and I'll put it on there. And it's ammonium glyphosate, or don't quote me on this, because I don't know the word. I'll have to rewatch the video to see exactly what it is. It's not good stuff. It's not just the beef trimmings. It's like the slime off of inside of a hide and the guts that are washed with chemicals to make sure that they don't grow gut stuff. So it's not something. Beef trimmings are like the extra fat, and you put a little fat and a little tough stuff and some gristle, and you put it in the burger, and that kind of fills the burger out. We do that all the time just when we make burger, at a local ranch or something. This is not that. Pink slime is totally different. Buffalo is good. Buffalo is I have tried buffalo. It's a lot leaner. So if you like a fat meat, it does not have the same flavor as that, but it is pretty good meat. It does buffalo take a little longer to get to the point where they're ready to butcher too. But yes, and so a lot of people are talking about growing greens for cattle and things like that. You know what? One of the things that's I thought was really interesting is finding out that carbon charcoal. Let me see if I can remember so I say the right words, because that's not probably right. Biochar. Biochar. So biochar is, I'm sorry, my chair is trying to buck me off. I'm sliding slowly off the front. Biochar is actually a charcoal product. And if you feed that to your cattle, you can actually reduce methane in your cattle by 18%. That's amazing. Okay, so this says 44% of ranchers, this is notes I wrote down from this weekend. 44% of ranchers are gone since 1980. That's half. That's almost half. Half of our ranchers are gone. So when I talk about this stuff, it's a passion of mine, because I know people who are good ranchers who their kids don't even want to become ranchers anymore because their parents are so stressed and they have to work constantly all day long. They can pick this thing up and they look on Instagram and they see somebody that has a life that's like, wow, that's a pretty sweet life. Now they forget that the good parts of ranching are there because of what they're dealing with as far as stress. Actually, it's better for them to go away somewhere and for a while, for a couple of years, and discover what life is elsewhere. And then a lot of them would want to come back. So, okay. Oh, let's see. Have you tried beefalo? I've been trying to find some beefalo. I've seen some beefalo. I know there's a place in Wyoming that has beefalo, or used to, but that was years and years ago. I don't remember. I know I tried it. We had a buffalo roast and beefalo roast. Beefalo is a cross between cow and a buffalo because they can breed. But I don't know anybody that actually. I don't know anybody that raises them right now, so I'm not sure. I can't try it right here. If anybody knows where any beefalo is, I would love to go try that. And also, I'm going to do some videos, if you think it would be cool, that about the cost of beef. Everybody's like, oh man, it costs so much to buy beef. But actually, even expensive beef, if you look at like buying, I don't know, fishy crackers. I call them fishy crackers. I don't know what they are. They're like the cheese cracker things. Cheez-Its or something. Things like that actually cost more per pound than pretty good quality beef. So when I need to do a few videos on that, like the cost of these things that we're trying to save money on, actually be better off if you just bought beef and not junk food. Junk food can be, even though it's cheap sometimes, per pound or per ounce, it's not cheap. So you're getting either pure protein or, junk. Ground bison. So there's also a restaurant here that serves bison burgers about 10 miles away from me. So I need to go up there and do a video about that too, because I think that's interesting. Okay, so Devin, so if you have 1,000 acres, for example, could you have more bison or cattle on that land? Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I think what you're talking about is, could you have more bison or more cattle? They're very similar. You basically have the same amount. One of the things that I'm really discovering is the benefits to the landscape that buffalo had on the landscape for wildlife and environment. When we think of like the best thing for environment is just to leave it alone, actually they need those large grazers to stomp the grass down, to pee on it, to poop on it, it just protects the land. It develops areas where actually birds prefer it, like prairie birds, birds that nest in grasses. They like that kind of stuff. And elk and deer. People do not understand this. Elk and deer do not like to eat rank grass. And so what rank grass is grass that has grown up and then gone dormant, like you see brown grass, right? They don't like that. They don't like to dig through it. They don't like to eat it. So what buffalo did in the old days is they would come through in a big herd and they just trash the ground. I mean, you're talking 100,000 buffalo come through somewhere. That's a big deal. So they just churn up the dirt and they eat the grass. And buffalo and cattle are very similar in the way that they they eat stuff because their stomachs are, they're ruminant animals, so they eat it over and over again, and their hooves are about the same size, their weights are similar. Cattle do not act like buffalo. When they're turned out on a range, cattle they prefer to hang out right next to the water where buffalo don't. Things like they don't move quite the same. But when a rancher is actually managing his property, which is more and more common now, they're managing it for grass. They'll move cattle like up to by putting out like salt and water tanks in areas where the cattle don't like to hang out, the dry, arid areas, and that moves the cattle to those areas. And then they'll ride and they'll push them out of the bottoms and they'll move them around similar to, but it's not the same. You're not going to compare the same, but very similar to what buffalo did. And what that does is creates the same situation where elk then like to come eat those areas that the cattle have been. So in cattle production areas, we're actually seeing that they're discovering more and more how beneficial the cattle are to the landscape as far as elk. So the larger animals like elk and deer, all the way down to the prairie animals like the huns and the prairie grouse and all those birds that live on the ground. So when you look at an ecosystem, a lot of times we see things that we just don't like, but those things are not necessarily bad things. You have to look deeper into the actual reactions of critters and everything. So ranchers do a service by doing what they do. They actually preserve land for the use of wildlife. Whether you get to access it or not, that's where people get in the big tissy fit, is they don't want to see cattle in their own personal honey hole. But they actually need to start understanding another aspect, is that not only does a rancher preserve land for wildlife, he produces food for the world by doing what he does. And because we have an excess of food in this country, in the US, we don't see this as a problem. So we're okay with demonizing the rancher because he's a individual we can talk about, and we don't have to make any money and everything. But if he doesn't make money, we will lose more and more and more ranchers. And at some point, guess what? We're getting all of our food from other countries, third world countries, who can then dictate to us what we actually do. Trail cams. Yeah. So that's interesting you say that. So there is American Prairie Reserve. Okay, they're an organization. I just did a video on them. They're creating a 3.2 million acre reserve in eastern Montana. Now, I would have a problem with this taking that land away from ranchers, but you can go watch my video about it and see what I saw. The problems that ranchers are having with it, I disagree with. And the problem I have, I don't think is being talked out, is the only problem I have, is that I don't want to see that land. I don't want to see too much of our land be put into a park, even though that's not what the American Prairie Reserve is doing, which is great. I don't want to see it lose production. I don't want to see us lose so much production ground that we lose ourselves, that we cannot feed this country because we've lost it. And the time to think about that is not after we've lost it. And you can't get it back. Right now is the time to think about this. To preserve the land, the best way, in my opinion, to preserve the land is to pay your ranchers enough money to where they continue to do what they do. And to do that, you have to buy from the rancher directly at this point. There's really no other way. The rest of it is all controlled. All the competition is basically gone. It's just 4 companies that deal with the packers. The retailers dictate the price to them, and they dictate the price they're going to pay to the feedlots. The feedlots and the ranchers are stuck. They have to just get whatever they can. And so in that system, it doesn't work for the ranchers. That's why we're losing 44% of our ranchers. It's just that way. And land is becoming more and more valuable because people are realizing how little of it there is. It's it seems vast out here. I mean, you go across Wyoming and Montana and you're just amazed by the vastness of the land. But we have to remember that it is a finite resource. They aren't making any more of this stuff. So as a country, when we produce food on land, you want to protect that land. So at some point you don't end up with a food shortage, which would put you at the mercy of whoever's supplying you food. Or you die, one of the two. So I was going to say, sorry, lost train of thought, gone. American Prairie is actually working to, because ranchers are against this, right? I said that. So one of the programs they've implemented is actually put out trail cams on these ranchers that border American Prairie. And what they do is then pay the rancher for pictures of specific animals. So if you get a picture of, let's say, a mountain lion, you get a certain amount of dollars. If you get a picture of an elk, you get a certain amount of dollars. If you get a picture of a bear, you get a certain amount of dollars. And that's to kind of reinforce and pay. Actually, what they told me is the rancher doesn't get paid for him supplying ground for this wildlife and the ecosystems to survive on their property. They don't get paid for that, even though they keep land available to wildlife. They don't get paid for it. Indirectly, maybe sometimes they don't get paid to do a lot of it. Okay, so they're paying them for these pictures is actually trying to help them with, hey, if you supply this land for these animals to live on while you're raising cattle and making a living, then you are able to get paid for that, which helps you produce more. You want to then keep your land available for these wild animals. And instead, a lot of ranchers, because they have to make so little money for everything that they do, they're trying to squeeze every dollar out of everything. They see wildlife many times as a pest, not as something good, because it's taking away grass. It's one of them kills their cow. It's only a detriment, and everything to the bottom line hurts a rancher so bad that they can't hardly recover from it. Okay, so let's get to some of these comments. One more thing. So I wanted to share, I don't know what the year was, that I'll have to look this up. I don't have the year, but it's coming out in my video with this guy. One of the things about how I always wonder, okay, I knew, and I've said over and over again, that ranchers doing what they do, protect habitat and produce food for the nation and the world, right? But I didn't know how you're going to pay ranchers more, okay? Because people say, well, the price in the grocery store is going up, but you never see that at the rancher. Very, very, very little. Now, right now, the price is higher, and that could be a detriment because it kind of gives ranchers a relief, and they stay doing what they're doing instead of look for opportunities to sell to their local people, which is a more long-term way to circumvent this, right? Long-term goal, answer to the problem, something like that. So there used to be, in like the 70s, okay, ranchers were paid about 60% of the dollars that's spent on food. So when you bought a piece of meat in the grocery store, 60% of that actually was paid to the rancher himself for produce, because he's the one that takes all the risk. He has all the payments. He's got to supply the food for the animal. He's got to raise the animal, keep it alive, bring it to market. He has the risk of that thing dying. He's got the risk of everything, like the price going bad, everything. Okay, so he was paid 60%. Now that's under 24% of the dollar goes to the rancher. So the top two places, the retailer and the packers, have squeezed. They've taken more and more of the profit and squeezed down the profit of the rancher and the feedlot down here. So literally, they're making less than 24%, and you can't make. If you make 24% of the dollar that, and you're taking almost all, the packer doesn't even take hardly any risk. He buys the cow and butchers it and puts it to the retailer. So he doesn't take that risk. It's like buys it, boom, boom, there. The risk is in the first part where you have to grow it until it's 6 months old. And then you have to grow it from there till it's ready to butcher. That's when all the risk and the problems can take place. So anyway, the Adventure Cowboy, I only make about $2,600 a month. So prolific drip makes $17 an hour. My wife's a school teacher. So you make $2,600. Are you a cowboy on a ranch, or are you like a ranch hand? So you guys are having a conversation on your own over here. I got to catch up on this. I'm going to go back up here. You figure out if you're around. Okay, so one of the things that Prolific Drip is saying is you got to figure out if your family can survive around $2,500 a month plus housing, and that would be a good place to start. There's much more that goes into this topic. Yes. So one of the things about becoming a rancher that's very difficult, and when they portray something in the Yellowstone show that is, I guess it can be accurate. It's so you're in the Yellowstone show, you show a bunch of guys that are single in a bunkhouse, right? And that's about the only way you're going to survive really well as a rancher, because you're paid, you get free room and board. Now ranches, one of the ranches that I went to this year, they have their ranch hands are all married, of course. So that's a completely different thing. It takes a lot more money to supply money to a family. So these families each have a little house on the ranch. So they're still supplying them with room, not board, but room, and, paying them a wage then. So that can be great. So here's the thing is you have to decide. I'm a big proponent of this. You have to decide what it is that you're willing to live without or with to do what you love to do. If you really want to become a cowboy, you can. You have to be willing to live with less. And that is probably going to be fine if you're single. If you're married, that's much, much more difficult. Okay. When you're, in my experience, the man can do with less as far as a house goes and certain things go, and a woman can't, and vice versa. So I'm just saying, as a rancher is on the other hand doing, he's not making enough money to pay his employees enough. So he's trying to get them for as little as possible, because he's basically, now ranchers are having to do all the work themselves, keep their family on the ranch to do the work for them, or try to get free help from around the area just to make it work. And that's because he doesn't make enough profit from his cattle. In the old days, like the 1970s, you made enough that they had large groups of hands that worked on ranches, and that's because they had enough money. People don't like to hear that the rancher makes enough money. Why not? He's supplying your food. He will not stay in business if you don't supply him with enough money. So those are things you have to take into consideration when you're trying to say, oh my goodness, he's making more money. Yes, he's superbly blessed that he owns land that he inherited, probably. Absolutely. And he can be grateful for that. It's a fantastic lifestyle in many ways, blah, blah, blah. But you also have to consider this is your food supply. When food supply is decimated, or there's more people than food supply, and you can do that by two ways. Either your population grows or the supply diminishes, okay, as in like the Mayans or Easter Island, when they diminish their resources to such a great extent that there's not enough, then they fight over it. And you get to the point where everybody is trying to, then the strongest man wins, right? That's not where you want to get to. So the only way you can get to, if you pay your ranchers more now, that is more sustainable in the future. Okay, I want to get to this, guys. So this guy said, why not cattlemen's associations demanding more than 24% from the processors? That is a very complicated political question. And I say political because all of this has to do with politics. There's a lot of politics up above that don't make any sense, but we have been conditioned as ranchers and cattlemen's associations to try to compete and help ranchers make money in the atmosphere that we have, instead of try to change the atmosphere. Okay, instead of incentivizing people to sell their beef directly to the customers and cut out all those middle people. We try to help them get the cost of their cattle down, which means doing things more efficiently, which is fine, but sometimes that means paying your ranch hand almost nothing, right? That means doing without a lot of things. That means the rancher doesn't make any money. That means he makes it through the year, but he doesn't actually get to do anything to enjoy life. So it's a very difficult question to answer. I think a lot of times we learn, well, always, as humans, we learn to do things because of the responses we get from them. So as we go through life, we learn how to deal with our wife in a certain way because she deals with us in a certain way. So we learn good behaviors and bad behaviors because of it. The same way here. Cattlemen's Association, stock growers, things like that. They do what they do because the industry is, at this point, okay, the industry is, the retailers dictate pretty much the price of the end product. They tell the packers what they're going to pay. The packers set their price down, and then the feedlots and the ranchers have to get whatever's left. And they don't have any way to adjust their profit. So stock growers and cattlemen's associations try to help them to make their product cheaper so that they can make more money. But really the answer is not that. It's to help the ranchers understand how to sell their beef directly to the customers like we used to in the old days. We used to have a carcass hanging in a butcher shop and everybody went down and got their meat. And it was really, really good meat. Okay, now the question I have, because I'm a realist, is how do we get people to do this? It's not like everybody's just going to run out and, butcher shop. I think people like the thought of it. People like the thought of community, but they've gotten so used to being entertained by social media and TV and everything that even though they're so lonely in this country, people are so lonely and don't know what to do with themselves and they're lonely enough that they're trying to gather together to fight things like climate change, and they're getting obsessed with being offended and things like that because they don't know what to do with these feelings in themselves. But instead of going out and actually becoming part of an actual community, they're so insecure, I believe, that they let themselves be used and do all kinds of things that they think are against the establishment, when actually exactly what the establishment wants them to do, or is promoting them to do. So that's my opinion. Sorry, too many opinions. Yeah, like it used to be. I remember shopping at the local meat shop, and it's wonderful. Walmart has, and the society is this. I mean, I don't blame people. The thing is you gotta be careful with we can get offended really easily. Oh, you're the problem. People don't want to buy whatever. People are trying to make a living, and also, so to do that, to be able to do more with their money, they have learned to shop and try to buy things cheap. The problem is they say they care. Okay, they say they care about the environment. They want to change the environment, but they don't want to actually do what it takes. So we can either argue about forcing somebody to do it, which I don't believe is going to actually do anything except for create a huge fight where nobody wins. Or you can figure out ways to entertain and educate people on what that does. What the rancher does for them is produce food, help the climate, keep wildlife healthy and sustainable on their properties, things like that. It is something that we have to teach, and it's not being taught. And one of the reasons it's not being taught is because people are afraid. People are afraid to say what I'm saying right now. They're afraid to, people are afraid to say that, where the food comes from and why the rancher is not making money. And they want to focus all on the history of it and the romance of it. And there is romance in it. And there's history in it. But how does that affect the person who's actually watching Yellowstone going, wow, that's so awesome? And then those, they go out hunting and that dang rancher, he can drive there. Why can't I drive there? And they're mad at the rancher for that. Or they go to their public land and they see cattle on it and they want to go fight the rancher to get the cattle off, not thinking that down the road that actually produces food for you and me, produces food for the country and the world. And that's how that works in a system. So anyway, sorry, sometimes I get off saying other things. So one of the things I wanted to do, Zach, yeah. So and sometimes we think we could live on a ranch because of the romance and the history, and then we actually do it, and you probably do it very well for a year. But once you actually have to make a living there, you one of the principles of life that you have to learn is that you have a certain amount of income and you have to live within that income. So you have to make more income. So the people that get out of ranching do it because they want a lifestyle that's above what they had, so they make more money by doing something else, which is fine. I believe in the freedom of the individual. You can go do that if you want. We just have to try to make sure that this ranching community that produces sustenance for us, that we actually use and need in our lives, that we can actually do that and keep that going for the future. Okay, so I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I think there's a lot of good things we can do to try to help that go. Okay, one of those is, please share with me. The best way to share with me, if you know somebody who sells beef locally in an area, you need to put where that area is, where they're located, and the name of their beef or the website or something. If you go to my Facebook page, Life in the West Facebook page, and message me, because I read all those messages. That's where I start out reading messages anyway. It doesn't mean I reply to everybody, but put it in there where it is, so I can start putting together a list so that I build a place where people can go and they can find who to buy beef from, right, in their local area, because sometimes shipping is a problem. But if they can find somebody in their area they can buy it directly from, that's a big savings. So let's move on from that. I want to talk about wild horses because this is interesting. This may not matter to you guys at all, but I thought it was kind of interesting. So wild horses in the Pryor Mountains, I'm just going to focus on them. I stopped in there, and this, I don't know how many of you guys know this. So I walked in there and I said, okay, how many wild horses is there on the Pryor Mountain wild horse range? And she told me how many acres there was. There's like 40,000 acres, and it's basically desert, guys. So it doesn't produce a lot of grass. Okay. But I said, how many horses is there? And she, well, here's the book. Here's the book. So this is the field guide so this isn't just a field guide. This is every single horse in the Pryor Mountain Wild Horse Range is in this book. They're a picture of them, at least one picture, usually of their head and their body, their age when they were born, who their mother and father was, and a little bit about them, where they hang out, who they hang out with, do they have a band of mares, that kind of. They're sorted by color in here. So here's the blue roans, here's the bay horses. So you got your bays, and then a bunch of red roans and buckskins. My dad has a horse racing business, and he doesn't have near as good a records on his horses as these guys do. This is incredible. So this is a wild. So I can understand why people call them feral horses, because this isn't wild. Okay, this is they're a managed herd of feral horses, which is really. So let's just be honest, okay? Now, that doesn't mean I don't like seeing them. And I was really intrigued by the fact that when I went up there, and I found, I'm going to post a picture of this horse that I took this weekend. Let's see if I can find him. So I found this, yeah, right here, this one horse. I found many of them, but this one horse I took a good picture of. So I found this horse right here, Tawa, and he's a 4-year-old stallion standing off by himself. It was kind of cool. And, you know, I'm out there taking pictures of him and things like that. And then I see a few more going down off a hill. So I walked over and peeked over the hill and got some video of him, and I'll make another video about that too. And I found that one too, but I don't remember his name at the moment. Cimarron or something. It's not Cimarron. If you want a more condensed list, they have a more condensed list too. This is a list of horses right here. So it was Quasar. That's who I found. I found Quasar and his little band of mares. Okay. So this is a wild horse herd. And for some reason, I'm kind of intrigued by, you know, watching them. And I'm like taking pictures of this one, and I'm taking a little video of that one. I drove by 1,000 head of horses to get to the wild horse range. And I didn't stop to take any pictures of them. I didn't stop to take a video. So what is it that intrigues us when we see a wild horse, a Mustang, versus a domestic horse? And yes, she told me that these are, you know, from Spanish Mustangs and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, actually, according to the BLM, DNA tests have confirmed that there is no blood in any of the wild horse herds that isn't in our domestic herds anymore. Because let's face it, that's where they came from. Okay. This herd right here has a ton of color, meaning they have a lot of roan horses. Okay. Lots of buckskins, lots of grulas, especially. Well, this is a buckskin here. Okay, this is a buckskin here. That's what a buckskin looks like. So why do they have that much color? It's because they were managed for that. They took out the ones that didn't have color. Because if you go around into normal horse herds, you don't have that much color. Okay, you don't have like 90% roans and buckskins and grulas. They did that from the 70s all the way up to now. When they removed horses, they would remove horses that didn't have color. So especially the stallions. So you have stallions with color breeding the mares. Pretty soon you have lots of color. Okay. So as a managed herd, I don't know why I told you that. Anyway, I drove past 1,000 horses to take pictures of these wild horses. So I asked this question on Facebook today. I think it's interesting. And this is aside from the fact that I believe that we need to manage our wild horses, and people have to get over their emotions, or we're going to destroy habitats completely without managing these horse herds. And you can't just pull out 10 and think you're actually doing anything. Adopting a wild horse is a fantastic thing, but we are literally 100,000 horses over what we can sustain right now on ground. That's not going to happen. Right now, the only way they're keeping the herds in check is by not tranquilizing. They're shooting the mares with contraception, basically. They're keeping them from coming in heat so they don't breed. So you see a lot less foals. And that's how they're keeping it in check. Otherwise, it'd be way, way more out of control. Now, how they do that is they kind of hunt them with tranquilizers on the ground. Some places it's volunteers, some places BLM, things like that. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, one of the reasons I believe that it's intriguing to watch wild horses and not necessarily domestic horses. Now, once I went and saw the wild horses, then every horse herd I see that's domestic catches my eye, which is interesting because then I'm looking for horses. So I took this picture. Well, you can go see on Life in the West page, go see the picture I took of some domestic horses in burned timber above a river. It was so beautiful. I just had to take a picture of it. So go there, take a look at that, and tell me what you think of it. But anyway, I think that sometimes it's like why we watch certain movies. It's the same way, right? We put ourselves in situations, right? Like we view ourselves as either we view ourselves as what we're watching, or we have a desire to be like the things we're watching. I think sometimes we feel caged by our society or our lives, the choices we've made in our lives. And a lot of times that has to do with we care too much about what other people think of us, things like that. But we feel hemmed in, right? We feel hemmed in by life and the people around us. And which is why sometimes we blame the government for things and blame other people for making us feel bad, even though we just need to deal with it ourselves and discover who we are in ourselves. But that's a different discussion. So when we see something that's domesticated and then we walk over and see something that's free, in our mind, free or wild, I feel that it actually gives us why that's emotional to us. It's a connection to how we want to be. I think we actually want to feel that freedom in our lives. We strive for it, and we feel that it's unattainable. So we see a horse that is domesticated. That kind of reminds us of our situation right now, right? But we see a horse that's running free, and it kind of gives us a feeling of like what we want to do in ourselves. Like we want to feel that freedom, that aliveness, that ability to take a risk and be adventurous and go do something that's on the edge, even though we would never do that in real life. A lot of us, we want to feel that. So I think that's one of the reasons that's compelling people to see wild horses the way they do is that freedom. They don't do this with cattle. Cows, they don't care. They want to kill all the cows. Nobody should have cows. But horses, it's completely different. So I don't know what you guys think. I kind of think that's something that drives us to do that. Yeah, I'm not saying this is right or wrong or anything. It's an analogy of like trying to understand why people take wild horses in the way they do, and why they look at them in the way they do when they drive. Because I'm not the only one. To get to the wild horses in the Prairie Mountains, you have to drive past a whole bunch of domestic horses standing on the side of the road that are beautiful. But we don't have the same thought process towards them as we do the ones in the wild. So it's interesting to see, why do they do that? And this is my theory on that. This is what I think. I think it's about freedom, that we want to feel that uncaged feeling, the wild, adventurous, go do something, take a risk kind of feeling. And we view that as kind of, these horses are able to do that. Yeah, even though we miss the fact that they have to actually eke out a really hard life. And the only way they get to breed a mare is if they kick the crap out of the stallion that's got those mares as his own, and then die from a really harsh life. But anyway, at least you get to experience it for a while, right? Oh, sometimes I get off on all kinds of subjects. All right. What other questions do you guys have? Saver 9, solid point. Yes, so that is true. Right. I think horse meat, they eat it in France and Canada and everything, would probably be another way that you could supplement the food source, because they are an animal, but they're completely taboo in this country. People would just get furious and upset with me if I even mention it. Oh, I'm sorry. I just did. Let's see. Saudi Arabia. We respect the horses. Yes. So respecting horses and dealing with them in a manner that helps the environment that you're in, because you have to think of it as a whole. Like, should we totally trash the environment by respecting or not respecting? I guess if you respect the horse, that can mean a lot of different things. But revering the horse, I think, is where you get in the problem. Respecting a horse is fine. They're an animal that, like Cowboy. We were talking about Cowboy earlier, the horse that I'm riding. There's a connection between horse and rider, and they do fantastic things for you. They're an amazing animals, right? And you can create a good team with horses, but that doesn't mean if you revere them, then you end up starting to destroy things because you're not willing to do what it takes to manage an ecosystem. So I guess that's my thought on that. Okay. Yeah, so here's another case in point. Somebody is saying how there's only one place in the UK that has wild horses, and that's actually where they're from. So they're from Europe. I mean, horses are from Europe originally. So just to be clear, okay, this is how horses came to the US. They were here thousands of years ago, or 1,000 years ago, let's say. Okay, it's not that long ago, but they were here, and they all went extinct through who knows what, hunting, climate change, whatever. And then when the Spanish came over, they brought horses with them, and some of those horses got loose from people who were making a life here, or people that just left their horses here, and that's where the horse came back to the United States. So when you talk to biologists, there's a few things about horses that they don't. That's why they don't put them on places like the American Prairie Reserve, place like that, because they're not necessarily native. They are a species that was introduced directly by humans to North America. The horses that we know now, okay, who knows what the horses before looked like, but these horses are not native wildlife to the U.S. So that's why there's this controversy of, should we have them in the national park? Yes, they're part of the American West. They're an icon. The Indians used them. They rode them, and they used them for warfare and hunting and everything. But that doesn't mean they weren't introduced by Europeans, because that's what they are. They're an introduced species from Europeans. Now, when we have introduced species by Europeans, a lot of people don't like invasive species, I guess you could say. But in horses, for some reason, because they've been here long enough, a couple hundred years, they're part of the American West, and therefore that gives them this emotional and nostalgic thought process about it. Now, the other thing is that horses don't have a cloven hoof, so they're harder on ground than cattle or bison, which is split hoof, because they don't have that split area which splits around things, like vegetation on the ground. Number two, this is something that I take for granted. Some people may not know. So buffalo and cattle only have front teeth on the bottom, only bottom teeth on their jaw. So they only have teeth here. This is gums on cows and buffalo. So they can't actually bite off grass. They don't bite it off. They grab it and then they hook it with their tongue against their teeth and rip it. That's how cattle and buffalo eat, and elk and deer too. All of them don't have any teeth on the front. Now that I say that, some deer might, but anyway, buffalo and cattle don't. Horses do. They have top and bottom teeth, so they're able to, because of that, they're able to actually trim or eat a plant down to the roots easier, because they can actually trim off that grass with the teeth. It's just like us eating a carrot. We can bite it off, right? Whereas cattle and buffalo can't do that. Horses can. So they can eat the grass way closer to the crown than those original animals. So that can be harder. It actually is harder. It's harder on the especially the fragile plant species, the grasses that are kind of fragile. So in a lot of areas, like out here on the plains and things, you see stuff that's really overgrazed. Certain grass species will be gone. I noticed that on the Pryor Mountains wild horses range is right up the road. That's BLM, that's managed grazing for ranchers and cattle, has a lot more grass species than the wild horse range. The wild horse range has the really, really hardy grasses, the ones that last the longest, but they don't produce very much. They don't produce a lot of roughage. But anyway, that's what's left. And that's because they're harder on that ground in some ways. So when a biologist looks at it, they go, since this isn't a native species, as this was actually introduced by Europeans, not natives, right? Europeans introduced this animal to the United States. They don't count it in their wildlife picture. So they put it, that's why they're talking about even removing them from the national park over, and people are, throwing huge fits about it, but they don't really think about the process or what, a lot of times they don't think about the ground or the whole ecosystem as a whole anyway. There's like, let the horses, many horses run as you can, which if you did that, if you didn't do any birth control on wild horses in the Pire Mountain Horse Range, in a few years, they would eat themselves out of house and home, and all of them would die of starvation because all the grass would die. So there wouldn't be any new grass going up, even if you took them off. And then they would all die. So no management of horses will kill all the horses. So I just wanted to kind of get that into, knowing what you're talking about and understanding some of the things I'm talking about. That's part of it. Whew. Okay. So I have thought, so I've trained a few horses. I don't really enjoy training horses that are brand new. I did train one that was like a wild horse. It was a little Buckskin horse I named Chisholm. I don't even know if I have a picture of him. I didn't see a picture of him in my photo albums. But anyway, he was raised like that. When I got him, he had never been touched ever. And that's an interesting thing to train a horse like that, because they're completely different than one that is very used to humans and human interaction growing up. They're actually easier in some ways and then less easy in some ways. So the easy ways are like they're wild horses or horses like that can be easier to train because they have no preconceived notions that they're your friend. You need to become a partner with a horse, not friends. When you're friends, then the horse actually tries to take the dominant approach of you, and you can get hurt because they think they control the situation. And that's what happens more often when you raise a horse of your own, is they feel that they're too, it's like grizzly bears getting used to humans and then all of a sudden seeing them as a food source. It's the same thing with horses that you raise. They feel like, oh, you're your buddy, and then pretty soon they feel like they don't have to do what you tell them to do. Whereas a wild horse starts off, if you start off correctly, a wild horse can actually learn to be that quicker because he'll see you as the dominant animal right off the bat. And no question about it. He's never grown up with you, so he's not your friend right away. So that you can become a partner, and that bond can be different. Louis L'Amour wrote a lot about that. And, I've thought about maybe adopting a wild horse and doing a series on it, but I don't know. I've seen people do it. And I don't think people like to talk about wild horses and they get passionate, but they're not that interested in watching it. So I still have to take that in consideration. If nobody watches my stuff, it doesn't matter what I do. All right. I am about done with this live stream. I really appreciate everybody getting on here and listening to me rant for an hour and a half. Anyway, I'm going to go eat some lunch. And then I don't even know if I have time. I was going to go over and put shoes on Calabar today, but I may not make that. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, if you know of anybody who raises and sells beef locally, put where they are and so the name of the town where they're at, okay, and who they are, their company name or their website. Go to my Facebook page, Life in the West, on Facebook, and message me on there that information so that I can really put together a list of places that you guys can eat meat directly from the rancher, so you benefit and the rancher benefits. That would be a fantastic thing, wouldn't it? All right. I appreciate it. Appreciate all your guys' well wishes. And Jacob V says, I would sure watch you break a wild horse. And there's also a consideration there too, is like, how much do I want to risk getting hurt too? But because that's a different deal. Appreciate you guys being on here. Awesome. Life in the West. That's it. A lot of people are on here, I think, from Life in the West on Facebook, but I just wanted to put that there. I hope everybody is got a bias one way or the other. you guys are going to know my bias, absolutely. But I do want to think. I want people to think about this critically. I want to think about this, that Trinity's not right. Nobody else is right. How do I take the information that I'm getting and apply it to life, not at the detriment of something major, but seeing it as a whole, looking into the future for our children, our grandchildren, and our country. So have a great day. God bless. You guys are awesome. I couldn't do any of this without you. I appreciate your support in any way possible. I'm going to try to come out with something that I can help, that you guys can have, some limited edition T-shirts or something like that have support your local rancher and stuff on them. Anyway, that's it for today. God bless, guys. Well, God bless if I can figure out how to turn this off. I think this is it. You're welcome, guys. You're welcome.